Well, we will get started, Senator. Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Clark, and I am a Special Assistant for Project and Policy for Senator Shaheen here in New Hampshire. I want to thank you all for joining us on today's call. Before I turn it over to Senator Shaheen for some opening remarks, I did want to go down a roll call to make sure we know who we have on the line today. So I will start with, do we have Margaret Burns and Becky Benvenuti from the New Hampshire Municipal Association?
Good morning, Peter and everyone. Yes, Margaret is here. Becky is not here with us this morning.
Thank you, Margaret. Do we have Sharon Penny from the town of Colebrook? Okay. Do we have Tom Holmes from the town of Conway?
I'm present here, Sir Peter.
Utilizing conservative media. I think
Thank you, Tom. Do we have John Frederick from the town of Jaffrey?
Yes, you do.
Thank you, John. Do we have Hunter Reesberg from the town of Newport?
He has publicly given donations to people.
Do we have Hunter from the town of Newport? Okay. Do we have Rodney Bartlett from the town of Peterborough?
Yes, you do, Peter.
Hi, Rodney. Thanks for joining. Kathy Lowe from the town of Plymouth?
Yes, you do, and I have Ann Abear with me, my finance director.
Thank you, Kathy. Do we have Julie Jenks from the town of Raymond? Okay. Do we have Jim Pinio from the town of Wolfboro? And do we have Jennifer Palmiotto from the Granite State Rural Water Association? Okay, and I know I saw a few people join while we were going through the roll call. Sharon Penny from Colebrook. Hunter Reesberg from Newport. Julie Jenks from Raymond. Jim Pinio from Wolfboro. Or Jennifer Palmiotto from the Granite State Rural Water Association. Okay, well, we'll give folks a minute to join. And we also wanted to introduce the press that we have on the line with us today. We have Mia Summerson from the Keene Sentinel, Patrick Adrian from the Eagle Times, Terry Levitt from the Conway Daily Sun, Paul Hayes from the Caledonian Record, and reporters from the Union Leader and WMUR. So just one more reminder before we get started, so please keep your line muted. And also, please try to keep your comments to just a few minutes so that everyone gets a chance to speak. So with that, I will turn it over to Senator Shaheen for opening remarks.
Well, thanks very much, Peter, and thank you to all of you. I am actually getting an echo on my line. I don't know if anybody else can hear it. Peter, can you hear it?
No, Good. Senator, we couldn't hear it.
Great. Okay. Hopefully it's gone away. Let me also recognize Sarah Holmes, who's my state director, who is on the call, and I believe Chuck Henderson, who works up in the North Country, is on, as well as Ariel Marshall, my legislative director, and Robert Hinson, who works on economic and business issues in Washington. So we are all on so that we can take your comments and try and respond to the best way we can and try and do everything we can to get your concerns reflected in any future legislative package to respond to the coronavirus. I really appreciate your taking time to join me on the call, and we may have some other people join as we're in discussions, and so hopefully we will have time to hear from everyone. I appreciate that you in our municipalities across New Hampshire are really on the front lines of dealing with this pandemic and all of the economic challenges that have resulted. I'm hearing from people across the state about loss in revenue that you were expecting. I know I saw some numbers for Plymouth and North Conway about losses from water and sewer revenues that had been factored into your budgets. So I know that you're experiencing the same kinds of challenges that the business community is across New Hampshire, and you really need help from Washington as we look at this upcoming year, as we think about how we get through this pandemic. I think when I talked to some of you months ago, it seems like for years ago now, but it was only several months ago, we talked about the challenges of this pandemic, and we were hopeful at that point that when we got to this point in the summer, it would be behind us, but unfortunately that is not the case, and so we're still looking at the need to respond in so many ways, and I am hopeful that we are going to soon get some agreement on a package in Washington that can provide help for states and local communities. If you're watching the news, and I'm sure you all are, you've seen all of those reports that point out that we don't yet have bipartisan agreement on what needs to be done, and you're probably aware that one of the real holdups is support for state and local governments. There is a disagreement. If we look at the package of legislation that came over from the House to the Senate in mid-May, what's been called the HEROES Act, it included about $1 trillion to help state and local governments, and it was distributed in different ways, but it will provide significant help. If we compare that to the HEALS Act, which is the proposal that was announced by the Senate majority a couple of weeks ago, it does not include additional funding for state and local governments. It does include flexibility, however, for spending money that is already coming in through the CARES Act, as did the House package. I think that is very good news as we think about the needs that everybody has, that whatever money is provided should be available to use in the most flexible way possible, so that at your level you know what your needs are, and it's important to make sure that you have some flexibility in using those dollars. So hopefully whatever gets done will include some of that flexibility. I continue to argue, as do many of my colleagues, for additional funding for state and local governments. I think it's very important as we think about the CARES Act and the $1.25 billion that came to New Hampshire as part of the CARES Act. That money has been distributed and continues to be distributed in ways that will provide so much assistance to people, whether it's the nonprofit community, additional Main Street businesses, other public services, testing and contact tracing that needs to be done if we're going to get this coronavirus under control. So I think it's very important for us to do that in Washington. I will continue to argue that, and the other members of our congressional delegation are in the same place on that. So my hope today is to hear from all of you what your needs are, what you would really like to see us do, and so that we can advocate for that as we're working to try and get some agreement in Washington on a next round of assistance. I appreciate that we have a lot of people in New Hampshire who are really hurting, people who have lost their unemployment, people who are facing eviction now that the moratorium on evictions has ended, businesses that are still not operating at full capacity and seeing a real decline in revenues, and of course you all in communities who have been impacted by revenue loss and are going to be trying to provide services to all of your constituents with that declining revenue. So again, I appreciate your being on the call and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Senator. Just one more reminder, please keep your line muted if you are not speaking, so we reduce background noise. And I will first turn it over to Margaret from the New Hampshire Municipal Association.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Senator Shaheen, for holding this call. Thank you, Peter, for inviting all of us to be here and to discuss this morning. Obviously, I want to leave plenty of time for the town administrators and town managers on this call to talk to you about their individual circumstances and what they're seeing in their individual communities. But certainly what the New Hampshire Municipal Association is hearing is that the need for additional funding from Washington still exists. And we certainly hear some rhetoric that state and local governments shouldn't get additional funding, or perhaps that they don't need it. Perhaps there's that suggestion out there that some of the money from the CARES Act that went to state and local governments is not being used, and that the funding is not really necessary. But as you alluded to earlier, one of the huge hang-ups for cities and towns has been the lack of flexibility that comes along with how the CARES Act money is used. Additionally, as you know, none of the CARES Act money was actually required to go directly to cities and towns, only for those that have a population of 500,000 or more, which of course doesn't apply to any of our communities here in New Hampshire or in New England. And so the allocations that were made here in New Hampshire were made by the governor's office through the Gopher Committee, and many communities have begun to use that money for expense replacement, but they aren't able to use it for revenue replacement. And the revenue declines and the revenue losses that cities and towns are seeing, it's only the beginning. The fallout from the pandemic and the impacts of revenue losses is going to continue. And it's very early on to determine what that will look like. But we know that there are significant revenue losses and that we will continue to see that in the next year or in the next couple of years. So we certainly are advocating for cities and towns to be included in the next package, and just really interested to hear what everyone on the call here has to say this morning about what they're seeing in their individual communities.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks so much, Margaret. So now we'll go in alphabetical order by town. So has Sharon Penny from the town of Colebrook been able to join us yet? Okay, so we'll go to Tom Holmes from the town of Conway.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, Senator Shaheen.
Hi, Tom.
I was one of your charter appointees to the Assessing Standards Board many years ago. Thank you for that.
That's a long time ago.
It sure is. So we're a tourist town, as you know, and something that was not anticipated was the number of visitors that we would receive over the summer. We are basically being overrun. I've never seen anything like it, both in number and problems. However, a lot of it is day tripping. It isn't being reflected in the business community, and it's certainly not being reflected in the lodging industry. So I hear, and so we have issues. We have issues with our local sites to the river and the parks being overrun, illegal camping, trash dumping. I've had to double and triple sometimes the sanitation facilities available. I've had to double and triple the cleaning schedules from those sanitation facilities. And trash pickup. Local rescue teams are very busy on the Kank and on the Sauk River and in some of the wooded areas. And I would not have guessed this last spring when the entire world was shut down. And when it comes to funding, right now we are using our Gopher money for these increased costs, and it's been much appreciated, no lifesaver. However, and I want to make this clear, at this time next year, if there is no funding for these things, it's going to fall squarely on the shoulders of the taxpayers through increased budgets at a time when many of them, because of poor business or maybe being out of work, could least afford large tax increases. For the present, though, the impact has been mostly felt in the crowds. What's looming is our possibility of having to abate a lot of the hospitality and restaurant industry, which would decrease the tax base and, again, increase property taxes. So we're very concerned about that. Our spring property tax bill did very well. It's an estimated bill, and we were only down 2% year over year from the previous year. So we had anticipated having to borrow a lot of money through tax anticipation notes. It did not happen. But building permits are way down. And we are starting to get, as I said, phone calls from lodging industry and so forth about property tax relief. We've relaxed our sign regulations. We allowed for more street-side signs, A-frame signs. We've allowed outdoor dining permits and outdoor retail permits. We're not charging any fees. There's serious discussion about allowing that every year, which I'm very happy about. It gives the town a festive atmosphere. The housing market, the commercial market is hurting. The housing market is very strong. Again, an unanticipated impact of shutting down the world is that a lot of people decided they wanted to become residents of places like Conway, and they're coming in to transfer their plates from New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, become New Hampshire residents, and live in their second home as a permanent resident. We are seeing, as a result, a pretty healthy automobile registration money coming in, but at the same time, it's, more people, more year-round people means, more overhead, more expenses. In a town like Conway, whenever funding is allocated based on census population, Conway gets short shrift because our census population is roughly a little over 10,000 people. However, our virtual population is at least double that. We have 46% of our property tax bills go out of town for all the second homes and businesses. So we have an overhead, we have a 10,000 person town and a police department, for example, of 26 officers, and a landfill and a transfer station and, hefty DPW budgets and things like that.
Hey, Tom, hold on a minute because I can't hear you. I don't know if there's, somebody just came on the line maybe, and there sounds like there's a line open somewhere.
What's the last thing you heard, Senator?
You were talking about the census numbers, the 10,000 census, but yet you have so many tourists come in and 40% of your tax bills go outside of the area. Very
good, correct. So I would say our population in reality is double the 10,000 that the census indicates because of the number of people who like to recreate and have second homes here in Conway. I mean, there are worse problems to have, don't get me wrong, but we have a much higher overhead than your typical 10,000 person town. And if you can understand the gist of my comments, is that I'm worried about a lot of these impacts falling on the shoulders of property taxpayers at a time when they may least afford it. And so that's why I feel that funding is critical and that it be continued. It would also help a little bit because we're in the trenches and we see the problems firsthand, if the funding were directly going to the municipalities rather than through the state. Nothing against the state's job so far. I think they've done an excellent job. But we could be more nimble. We could turn on a dime, for instance, when these problems arise, rather than having to, discuss and contemplate the impact of us spending, say, $40,000 or $50,000 that may or may not get reimbursed. So I guess that's the shortest comments I can make, Senator. It was nice talking to you again. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom, for those comments. And apropos, trying to have funding go directly, I think Margaret raised the issue that seems to be reported in some national news about the fact that funding from the CARES Act hasn't been spent. Well, one of the reasons some of it hasn't been spent is because it actually hadn't gone out from Washington yet. We have, I know, housing and homelessness money. A lot of the funding that's gone through HUD has not come to states and communities yet. And so I certainly appreciate that it would be helpful to have those dollars be able to go directly to communities or some sector based on population. And I know that counties, in the HEROES bill from the House, it's distributed to county based on population or a certain percentage of it, and that would be one way to do it. But I certainly appreciate what you're saying about the need to get it directly into the hands of folks who can make those decisions about how it should be spent. I was up in North Conway at Big Dave's Bagels talking about the PPP program the beginning of July, and he also pointed out the challenge that you mentioned about being overrun with people from out of state coming up for the day, and suggested that they weren't always as thoughtful and sensitive to the needs of others as he had seen in the past. And so it's unfortunate that we're seeing that kind of response from people. Hopefully people would be more responsive and not as rude to folks in the communities where they're visiting. As you talk about the need to try and help some of the businesses that are related to travel and tourism, that's one of the efforts that is part of the discussions around any package for the coronavirus. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to see some help for some of those businesses in addition to the PPP program, because they have absolutely been the hardest hit. And as we think about how can we most help communities, most help the people who need it, thinking about how to address your revenue base is also important, I think. So thank you for those comments, and hopefully we can get something done here so that there's some certainty for you all as you're thinking about your future budgets.
Thank you, Tom. I think we now have Jennifer Palmiato here from Granite State Rural Water Association. Jennifer?
Hi, good morning, and thank you for convening this wonderful conference call, and thank you for listening, Senator Shaheen. I think what you're hearing from the systems is most important. There's definitely a real range of what systems are experiencing. For some, it is there hasn't been too much change, but then for those in a place like Plymouth or Keene, places that have colleges, of course, that's been a big difference. Early on, I think there was some trouble accessing PPE. I think we've come pretty far with that, and as we're learning what types of PPE are more effective, that will also be important for water and wastewater operators to keep up with. And another thing is just that while there are many essential workers, I think that our water and wastewater utility, their staff are often the unsung heroes, and they have not skipped a beat during this pandemic. And just if there's any way that, with HEROES Act and those kinds of resources, that we include them in those benefits. And I think that's all that I would have to say, because really hearing from the systems is best. And there's just a very wide variety of effects that they're experiencing.
Good. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jennifer. We'll now move to John from the town of Jaffrey.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Senator Shaheen, for taking the time to speak with us. I'd like to echo the previous comments regarding the public works employees. They were forgotten when the stipends were given to our first responders, the police and firefighters, and our DPW workers, particularly those at the recycling centers and transfer stations, are dealing with this firsthand, as are the town clerks, and they've been forgotten through this. So I just like to support that sentiment. Our big concern here in Jaffrey, and the biggest hit that we took, was our small businesses, particularly the small restaurants. Really were hurting during the spring. They've recovered somewhat, but as we're heading back into the second wave, support for them is going to be critical to keep them going, to get to the other side of this thing. Here at the municipality itself, our big concern is, that we continue to wrestle with how to adequately run our meetings with the hybrid formats using Zoom and other methods, while still. Yeah, so a robust education program would be great, but I know that isn't realistic. But we're still trying to figure out the correct blend to make that work well, so that particularly our older members of the boards that aren't that familiar with technology can make their way through it. So obviously with that comes the funding. Gopher's been doing a nice job for us here. The big revenue stream that we're most concerned with would be the meals and rooms tax and the highway block grant, and we've been told that the meals and rooms tax will still come in. Hopefully that happens, and the highway block grant money's been coming in. We've already made adjustments in our CIP budget to accommodate for losses there, anticipating that we wouldn't see those revenues. Our motor vehicle registrations are through the roof. All of these 0% financing deals that came out when this first hit have been, just an unbelievable boon for us. The next piece that we're most concerned with is how we're going to conduct the next two elections, the primary in September and then the general election in November. And we've already, basically have shifted. We're going to utilize a drive-in format similar to what we did for our town meeting, but with that comes the cost of, procuring tents and the state supporting us with the PPE, but, the other costs associated with it, which, we would submit through Gopher and would expect to be reimbursed there. And then the other big concern would be as we proceed and as unemployment benefits wane would be the welfare and how that impacts our budget. So that's, otherwise we're doing okay here. We're holding our own, and we haven't seen a large number of cases on this side of the state. So, but we know that change very swiftly. We are the home of Mount Monadnock, and we are seeing our share of out-of-state traffic here that is overwhelming that park. So and we've been working very closely with the park managers there to help them and try to keep the area safe for everybody. So once again, thank you.
Thanks, John. Can I ask you, when you said you're planning to conduct the next two elections with drive-through, do you have to get a special approval from the Secretary of State to do that? Or
we have submitted a letter of proposal to both the Attorney General's office and the Secretary of State's. The format and concept has been proposed to them, over the phone, and they asked us to send letters. But what it would be basically is you'd come in, you'd approach the ballot clerk's desk, if you will, their tent in this case, get checked in, receive your ballot packet, and then proceed into the parking area, which would be the voting area. So instead of walking, you're driving. Basically, you're carrying your voting booth with you. Complete your ballot, exit through a portico where the ballot box would be, submit the ballot, and then drive away.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I assume for people who might not have access to a car that they could just vote by mail, vote absentee.
Yes, we have seen a large uptick in requests for absentee ballots, as you would expect with this. So, and we're encouraging that campaign, if you will, the promotion of absentee balloting has been going on for the last couple of months. And again, with that though comes the postage piece, which impacts our budget. So that's another one of those gopher expenses.
Well, we got $400 million into the CARES package, as you all are probably aware, to help with election security. New Hampshire got about $3.2 million of that. Hopefully we can get some additional funding into whatever next legislative package we're able to do, because I am hearing from communities, from voters about the concern about the stamp piece. And I know that the committee that Secretary of State Gardner appointed on how to look at this election given the coronavirus challenges, one of their recommendations was to send a prepaid envelope so that every voter could request an application, and then it got hung up on the prepaid stamp piece. So hopefully we can provide some additional help to address some of those costs that you'll be experiencing.
Thank you.
And it's my understanding that, Tom, I don't know if you're still on, did Conway hold a drive-through voting for your town meeting?
Yes, we did, Senator. It was quite successful and quite popular. It was our town meeting, so it was a relatively lower vote count than the state or federal election. However, it was exactly as the other gentleman described. We had drive-through, pick up your ballot, go to the parking lot and vote, and then pass your ballot to a kiosk on the way out. We used our Department of Public Works garage. We cleaned it up. We removed all the vehicles, and everyone that showed up thought it was fantastic. But I think we had about a 40% absentee vote as well, or else we probably would have had traffic problems. For the state election this September, we are going to use the same location, but it's not going to be drive-through. It's going to be walk-in, and we're going to have socially distanced booths and sanitation crews and so forth, because we're concerned about how cold it might be if we have the garage doors open all the time.
Sure.
And there's plenty of parking there, so that's the plan at the moment.
Well, I know it's a big challenge that communities are facing. So thank you both for that. That helped to give me a better sense of what you're thinking about in terms of the election as well as the challenges you need help with.
Thank you, John. And I believe we have Sharon from the town of Colebrook with us now. Sharon, are you on?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Senator.
Morning,
Sorry, there's always a crisis.
No, I'm so glad you made it on the call.
Thank you. Perhaps you've already spoken about this when I was absent, but up here in the upper North Country, we have a great concern about how COVID and in-migration from cities and everything else up here is affecting our welfare program. I am the overseer of welfare in addition to the town manager. We have a very, very small staff, and I am getting inundated by people requesting services. Of course, with the COVID quarantine, there's difficulty accessing shelters just for interim housing, and a lot of properties are being bought up. And I have a great concern that I'm going to run out of money very soon, in addition to not being able to anticipate the volume that's coming through town. There truly is an exodus. I mean, just a sidewalk survey will show you license plate from all the hot spots, and they're here in northern New Hampshire. So I just wondered if there was anything specific that might be earmarked for that at the state level through the feds, or what anybody else was doing. My overall budget is about $8,000 a year, and statutorily we are required to take anybody that knocks on the door and help them. So that's my dilemma right now.
Wow, that is a dilemma. You know, this call is the first time I've heard that has been an issue, that people have been coming from out of state looking for welfare services in towns. I think our thinking when we passed the CARES Act was, well, we're going to do the rebate checks, and we've got the unemployment that hopefully will cover a lot of people. We've got the PPP loans to help businesses,
right,
and then funding to help with health care and hospitals and on the medical side. But I hadn't realized how much of an issue the welfare piece is.
Well, I think, Senator, that, we're getting an influx, but we also, the northern tier,
sure.
Housing is cheaper, cost of living is somewhat cheaper.
Yeah.
You don't have a vehicle and stuff, and we've seen, people get on a bus or take their cars that are barely working and drive up here and land here, and then, just kind of get passed around the northern towns. They're usually on disability, and I mean, a lot of, I would say probably 40% last year of my clients were not from New Hampshire. They just landed here from, Connecticut, Rhode Island, whatever. It puts a huge burden on small towns. Huge.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? Let us do a little investigating and see what we can come up with that might be helpful.
Well, thank you. I spoke to Peter, and we had Chuck Henderson in the other day for some other stuff. So your staff has been always very, very helpful. I definitely appreciate it.
So when you say 40% of your clients were not from New Hampshire last year, how would you compare that to this year?
I see an uptick, and I think this is all just settling down. I mean, I haven't even had a moment to do any data accumulation, but the real estate sales are incredibly up, particularly in Colebrook. And there's a lot of folks, according to the realtors, are coming from New York and other places and buying up everything. So that in and of itself, changes the demographics somewhat. And I'm just afraid that, I don't know, in a couple of months or something, you're going to see that second wave of people fleeing, particularly depending on how the virus presents in the winter months. And they just, they land here. I mean, it's beautiful. It's God's country, and they land without, 5 cents in their pockets, and with children in tow. And our back to school issue is still slightly undefined. So I just see a bit of a disaster in the making, if you will.
Sure.
Not to be negative, but I've seen this and it's happening, and I just wondered what I could do were that to happen, because my hands are tied somewhat. All the shelters and downstate. Mm-hmm. I had a particular client with 3 autistic children who is from New Hampshire, but I couldn't get them in anywhere in terms of a homeless shelter. Everybody's chock-a-block full, and some of that, of course, is the economic downturn for our own citizens. Right. So I don't know. I think if you would ask any of the other social service agencies, such as Tri-County CAP or whatever, I think there's a definite rise in client services.
Yeah, I have heard that.
Yeah.
From social service agencies, but this is the first time I've heard it from on the municipal side.
Well, see, that's the thing. It depends where you are and what kind of budget and what kind of staffing you have. And I have a very small budget, and I am the welfare officer. So, it presents itself immediately to me, if you will.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sharon. Just
sure.
A reminder, we have about 20 minutes left, so we have a few more speakers to get through. So I'm going to move to Rodney from the town of Peterborough.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Senator Shaheen. I'd like to echo almost everything that's been said today, from the day trip impact to demand on our social services. And I really do think that it is a much broader impact from the coronavirus than people are willing to talk about. We've termed it the COVID cloud. Almost everything in your life, whether it's work, employment, family, friends, paying your bills, do you wear a mask, do you not wear a mask? It has been so impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic that it permeates almost everything we do. There's not a call that goes by that the COVID cloud has a part of that discussion. We had a Zoom meeting with the local Rotary Club this morning, and believe it or not, COVID impacts were almost part of every discussion with the Rotary Club.
I believe it.
So it's not just what the towns are facing; it's our residents, it's our visitors, and I think it is so obvious right now when you look at how the school systems and the Department of Education are trying to put forth the return to school programs. There's so little certainty as to what's going to happen with that. It brings up problems with social distancing, busing, remote learning, broadband access. This pandemic has really shown us a lot of weaknesses in our systems and a huge need really to step back and plan for what our future is going to be. Whether it's move forward with a vaccine or education or both, we really need to take a look at what's out there in front of us, not just this year, next year, 5 years, and so on, as to how we respond to these type of crises. It's been a very demanding 2020, to say the least. I will add in one positive note, though, and I'll ask John from Jaffrey to chime in. Peterborough and Jaffrey, I believe, have just put together our financing package of $12.6 million for a joint water supply program to help both Peterborough and Jaffrey. And in fact, one of the major benefits is to the business of Millipore Sigma, who's deeply involved with the mechanics of developing a vaccine, and they're hiring people every day of the week and expect to grow by 500 people. They presently employ 1,000. So if you keep up the hard work, every once in a while you do get a silver lining. Right, John?
Absolutely.
Well, it's nice to have some good news, Rodney, and I appreciate what you're saying. There's an anxiety that permeates everything people are doing today. I mean, I feel it. I hear it when I talk to people, and it almost doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're in business, staying at home, kids in school, whatever it is. It's a huge concern, and the point you're making about we really need to look at the future of New Hampshire, our communities, America, and think about what we're doing next. I'm hopeful that when we get through this crisis, one of the things that we will do is think about an infrastructure package that includes not just some of the traditional infrastructure, but high-speed internet, because one of the things that is very clear is the impact of the failure of high-speed internet to every household in New Hampshire and in America, that we will look at how we put people back to work in some of those areas in ways that address what is going to be a long-term economic challenge from what we're going through right now. So I think you're right on in terms of thinking about not just how do we get through this period, but what is the future going to look like, and how do we envision a future that's going to be a lot more positive in a lot of ways for people in New Hampshire and in the country.
Well, thank you, Senator. I really do think that's the ultimate focus for where we are today. It's truly the big picture, but we need something in front of us to focus on that creates a more positive and progressive New Hampshire, New England, the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. I will now move to Kathy from the town of Plymouth.
Do you have time for me?
Always, Kathy. Come on.
Thank you. At the risk of sounding redundant, I want to echo what pretty much everybody else has talked about, like loss of revenues because of COVID, and concerns about future revenues from the state as far as highway block grant, rooms and meals, things like that. And also I'd like to echo what was said about giving we gave our first responders extra money but did not do anything for our recycling center or our highway employees. And recycling, I have to say the recycling guys have been there every single day because they have to take care of the trash. And they're at risk on a daily basis, and I think that they deserve, something. And the highway guys are out there, working hard too. So, just to think about them.
I agree with all of those comments, by the way. I think for so many of our essential workers who are on the front line and who have not gotten the same kinds of salaries that so many other workers have, to recognize their sacrifice and what they've been willing to do is important. I know that the HEROES Act does that. It's not yet clear what we're going to be able to get in this next package, but hopefully we'll recognize that work.
Yeah, it would be great. So let's see. So we are a college community, and we are concerned about PSU is looking for reopening the college this fall and welcoming back their students who are all coming from out of state, or a bunch of them are. They will be tested before they come here. They'll be tested when they get here, but still, it's scary for us. We have not unlocked our doors yet. I mean, we're available to the public, every single day. Regular business hours. We'll take people in by appointment one at a time. But we have not unlocked our doors because we just don't want to bring it into our town hall and infect other, our workers. So we have to close down completely. I've got so many notes here, FEMA reimbursement monies, the FEMA applications, the approval of the applications hasn't been completed in order to allow us reimbursement for the extra money that we had to put out for, emergency expenses over and above what normal expenses would have been. So, we're waiting for that to happen. The shelters in the area have been closed, so our welfare officer has had to put people up in motels, which cost the town extra money. Everybody's coming to New Hampshire, from other states. They're emptying out our supermarkets, making it hard for locals to get, their own needs met. let's see. Oh, and so at March meeting, our highway department had put in a request in the budget for some much-needed equipment to, to meet, like, needs of the town for the roads and for plowing and various things like that. And they had put stuff out for bid. They had gotten quotes. We put that in our budget. It was all approved. And some of these companies have pulled out of the 2020. They're not going to do anything until 2021, and they're going to charge us extra because of COVID. COVID put a stop to, like, all of their, manufacturing or moving forward with, building the equipment that we need. We're trying to promote economic development in Plymouth. We've sent out a bunch of letters to businesses and inviting them to our town, but now because of COVID, nobody's going to come here. So we're losing, we were hoping to build up our tax base, to help offset loss of revenues and to help lower our tax rate because the town of Plymouth is 65% tax exempt. So, not getting the revenues that we need is hurting us as much as, not getting the money, like 65% of, tax revenue. Yeah. So, I don't know. What else can I say? I've got a whole bunch of stuff here, but.
Well, certainly, I don't know if you were on the call when I said that we were going to be doing everything we can to try and ensure that there is funding for state and local governments.
And I was happy to hear that, and I thank you.
I think that particularly small communities got short shrift in the last CARES package, and I know that the New Hampshire delegation wants to make sure that doesn't happen again. And,
right.
It continues to be a point of contention. Let me ask Kathy, though, on the FEMA reimbursement, have you submitted the application, and has FEMA, are they taking a long time to consider it? Have they turned it down? Is there something that we can do to help support that application?
We've been told that the forms aren't ready for us to submit, application for reimbursement.
That doesn't sound
they're
right.
far behind with things.
Let us see if we can follow up with you on that, Kat, and see if there's anything that we can help with there.
Okay, that would be great. I appreciate it. And I'll get off my soapbox for now.
No, I think we all feel like we would like to be on a soapbox almost every day these days.
I know.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kathy. I just want to see if Hunter from Newport, Julie from Raymond, or Jim from Wolfboro were able to join us. Okay, and is there anyone that I have not called? Okay, Senator, I will turn it back to you for closing remarks.
Okay, I just want to thank you all for taking time to share with me what's going on in your communities, and we stand ready to try and do everything we can to be helpful. Obviously, as I said, I'm continue to push for funding for state and local governments. I think it's very important, and hopefully we can get some agreement that will address that. But if there are other issues that you think of, concerns that you have that you think we can help with, in terms of the federal bureaucracy, or if there are ideas that you have for another round of legislation, let us know that. The sooner we know, the more helpful we can be in trying to get things into any package of legislation. So, again, thank you all for everything you're doing to provide services to people at such a difficult time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you,